And boom, we're back for another episode of AlphaCast. I'm Mike Winter, and I'm here as always with my buddy, the Cowboy Wizard over there in the Big Flat, Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the great state of Jefferson, where freedom still reigns supreme here in the uh, jumping into winter, full feet ahead with snow in the mountains and the river flowing, and looking forward to getting some snowboarding in. We were just talking right before I hit live with our guests about snow in the mountains up there in Tahoe, and looking forward to a boys trip, Music and Sky. We're doing a Music and Sky men's retreat, snowboard retreat in January. That's going to be fantastic. I don't know, Michael, if you snowboard, if you want to join us, holler at me after the show. It's going to be a great time hanging out with freedom-loving, sovereign-minded men. And one quick thing too, Bear, I just got to say, as we move into the holidays, we tend to indulge sometimes in dietary exploration that we don't typically do, pies, cookies, and sort. And I just been loving the Illumin Digest since
Oh,
Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for this. I don't typically need it. However, these last few weeks, it's been phenomenal. So if you guys are going to be indulging a bit during the holidays, I highly recommend our Lumen Digest product with enzymes, probiotics, mastic, ginger, clove, aloe, and the fulvic minerals. Phenomenal formulation and actually super tasty as well.
And one of the secret ingredients that you won't find anywhere is the mastic tree resin from Greece, which does amazing things for your whole oral cavity all the way down through your digestive system. Just while you're on an infomercial, and I'll make this brief to our audience, we have just a great community that supports us. And we're in the throes of winter right now, and we're just talking before the show that all the roads in and out are closed. So we're trying to get people's orders out. Our company is growing in leaps and bounds, and I've also launched several new lines that I was hoping to get all done before the holidays, but a lot of it will have to wait until after. And a lot of this is all authentic, stuff from the lab, from scratch, from herbs with, technologies and a lot of experience that is not available sincerely anywhere, in the marketplace. So if people could just indulge us a little bit of space to understand that just for me to go out in the lab, it's quite an amazing thing this year because, or this time of year, because it's cold and we have to fire up the grid and, warm things up and run a lot of equipment, which our battery backup won't handle. So we have to run Jennies. And, our whole mission statement is that you can live out in the boonies off the grid and run a very substantial business, but it does take a lot of effort and it's not for everybody. And so, we've got a lot of support. We thank you all. And take it away, Mike.
Fantastic. And we really, really hope you guys we're wishing you the merriest of Christmas and the happiest of holidays, that you may be able to celebrate that with your family and friends wherever you're at. One of our favorite times of the year for sure. And today we'll be jumping back into one of our most favorite topics, which is the law and specifically equity, with our good friends, Michael Joseph and Phil Mederi of the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. I was happy and very, very pleased with the equity passage course that I went through over the summer, and I am now using those skills to discharge and really handle my life in a new way that is empowering. And we're going to go deeper into that today and really just touch on a lot of topics related to law and equity. Natural design is the template gifted by our Creator for the elevation of human consciousness as we journey through the procession of embodiments within this realm. Imagine the possibility of societal structures mirroring the straightforward elegance of nature. Now, contrast this with administrative agencies beyond number, each governed through unintelligible codes in the literal millions and enforced through violence to usurp our sacred birthright of self-determination. Quote, we are here to tell you that there is always remedy in law. Mankind now presides over the transition of the ages with the opportunity and choice to realize heaven on earth, with the caveat that we gain knowledge through the unification of heart and mind. On this episode, Michael Joseph and Phil Mederi from the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship guide us in a deeper understanding of living free through equity and law. We hosted on-site workshops in addition to conducting multiple AlphaCast interviews with experts on issues ranging from self-governance, from status correction to land patents. But equity lies central to reestablishing independence peacefully and honorably. So join us today in this timely and critical discussion. Become a conduit for the incoming radiance that will dissipate the darkness we have all endured into a distant memory. We currently have a link here in the show notes, alphavedic.com/sacred honor. That will take you to a free ebook to give you more information on equity, as well as a opportunity to sign up for the second wave of the equity passage, which and Bear and I went through earlier this year. Bear, of course, being a veteran of this, having done this work a decade ago or more. So it's great to have him in here, of course, to bring all his knowledge. But check that out. And actually, and I know Phil is going to mention this later, but I'll tell you right now, they've been nice enough to honor the Alfa Vedic community with a $500 discount on the course. Can't say enough about how much value there is in this. So check that out at alphavedic.com/sacred honor. The link's in the show notes. Bear, Lando, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, and Michael and Phil, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm looking forward to this talk to go a little bit deeper for our audience into what this thing called equity is. And like a lot of people long ago, I entered into this realm because of my own issues with agencies and things, and I wanted remedy. And back in those days, we kind of flew by the seat of our pants, got in a lot of trouble, and figuring things out. And also in the process, I worked out a lot of my personal anger issues with the system. Before finally arriving to where you gentlemen are at, which is equity. And realizing that I didn't need to go to war with anybody or be at odds with anything. I just had to understand, number one, how things work, which we learned a lot about that, but then, understand that things do work out when you enter the realm of equity. So I'd really like to, just sit back and let you guys do a presentation. And then, as you were saying, Michael, we'll kind of segue into some questions and answers or wherever it takes us. So thanks again for being with us. And so whichever one of you gentlemen want to start us off, I'll let you go.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Really, really appreciate it. Love what you guys bring forth in the world as well. Love having you guys as allies. And it's continuing in much bigger ways. I think we have a lot of stuff to share coming forward. I know Mike and I are working on stuff behind the scenes in a variety of ways. So, here we are. We're not finding our way into the new age. We are in it. It is already birthed. We are just helping more and more people see what they're already feeling, right? And we're not alone. That we're in this whole new warriorship. That's beautiful to see how many folks like us are out in the world doing great work. And it seems to find its way into more refinement. Are you guys having this experience? Are there there's more and more people that are sharing this kind of information, and there seems to be a
Absolutely.
refinement that's going on. Even some of the folks that have been kind of, if you will, kind of old school, or maybe their alignment wasn't exactly straight and they're finding their way. There's just this force going on where we're just being refined, and equity is just a whole nother level. At least the way that we hold it and bring it forward is a whole nother level of deep chiseling and deep refinement. It's like going into what do you call it, like a car wash, and you're super grimy and dirty because you just got done with a mud gupping, and you come out the other side and you're really clean and you're ready to dive into life in a different way. I know it might sound like an odd analogy, but really that's kind of what happens. You kind of get washed over with a whole new
Yeah.
lens of life,
Just a quick comment, even though most of us enter into this, as I mentioned, because we have issues to deal with, it becomes apparent over time that it's really not having anything to do with that. It's about a personal discovery and the realization
Very much.
which is absolutely necessary for our spiritual evolution. Because as long as we feel that we are a victim, or that there is some earthly force that has power over us, or that we have to ask permission,
Yeah.
that's an impediment to our evolution of why we're here in the first place. So, it's much more so folks out there that are maybe kicking the tires, with learning this stuff. It goes much, much deeper than just finding remedy for your issues. And whether or not you employ, some of the things you'll learn in this course, just the knowledge that it brings is going to free you up on other levels that is worth more than any other part of it. I think that was my own experience. So sorry to interrupt, Michael.
No, no, not an interruption. To me, this is a discussion. This is great. Yeah, thanks. That is such and that's kind of what I was bringing forward. Like, there's this refinement going on, and this is exactly where we need to be in our evolutionary process, and it's birthing. It's really, really beautiful to witness.
I'll just add, yeah, that one of the main tenets we talk about, of course, is substance over form, as
That's
Bear's
right.
alluding to here, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed on some of these channels out there that are pushing commercial process is they aren't quite in tune with equity. And so this is a very important foundation before doing any paperwork. And that's what this course is like. The first, 3 or 4 modules is about this specifically, obviously knowing the history. By the way, guys, too, we did a previous Alpha Cast back in the spring, and Marcia Ann was involved with that. And we go through the history and stuff that really sets the foundation for where we are now. So if you haven't listened to that and you're listening to this now, you might want to hit pause and go watch that one first, because we might do a brief recap, but we're not going to go into the nitty gritty of that history. But it's important to know where you come from and how we got to where we are today. But yeah, the substance over the form. And you're right, there is like a spiritual gnosis, right? That is sort of evolving in our communities, and people are really becoming hyper aware to the inside out approach.
Yeah. Yeah, so we didn't plan on going into any of that historical stuff today, at least the stuff we covered before. So I think that's great advice to just retroactivate. It's really great information. It's astounding. And it does get into the deepest truth, which is, at least it sparks that deeper truth, which we are the currency of the system. And it's a simple truth to grok the mind around. Just if you start realizing that the way that the corporate system, the commercial system functions is it is a hollow, empty vessel. They're called corporate fictions, and they have no life existence without our influence and our energy. So if you just take it from that point right there, that we are the currency of the system, we animate it. Right? So if we animate it, we are the center of power. So that's a great place to start right there. So the system itself has become very arrogant, and it assumes authority over us, and we've lost our way, and we give away all of our power and authority to something else outside of us. And the whole system, our whole life is indoctrinating us to always give our power outside of us. And this whole movement is about finding that deeper truth, that we are the currency of the system, and we are we are in that flow of creation, of creative force, right? And there seems to be something out there that knows that, and they just want to feed off of that creative force by kind of putting us in this little blinder space where we can't really see the truth. And they're just like riding our backs and harnessing our energy to create what it is that they want instead of what it is that we want. So that's the crux of it all.
Yeah, there's this notion that equity aids the vigilant, right? Bill, you talk about this, and not
Uh,
those who slumber on their rights. So this is what I love about Alpha Vedic, and what we talk about is like we have a divine duty to seek knowledge, right? And the greatest sin really is those who slumber in that sin. Like if you look at the Spanish definition, without, right, without knowledge. So today we're gonna dish out some knowledge to y'all.
yeah. So I want to take just a quick moment to talk about the how equity fits into the Foundations for Self-Governance, which is the seminal program that the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship holds. And it has 4 distinct pathways, and it's national status passport, trifecta, land patent, and equity. And they all work together. They work separately really powerfully, but they work most powerfully together. And the whole idea is that you structure your life in the private, and while you're cleaning up your affairs in the public, and you're migrating your aspects of your life into the private. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time. Everyone's on a different path and a different trajectory. And when you set yourself up into the private, then it minimizes your challenge until you just get stronger and stronger in who you are. You get to a point where you really don't have challenges anymore. You might have a couple situations here and there, but you know how to easily navigate it because you know your center, right? So that's the whole crux of this. And equity has a seminal part in all of this. One, it really is just the way that the course is laid out and the essence of it. It helps you find your center in a very, very strong way. And if you watch it many, many times, then it really helps galvanize you. But the idea of equity is that I call it the ultimate remedy for everything commercial. And it is the ultimate remedy for everything commercial. Anything that you're having any challenge with in the public system, it gives you that level playing field where you walk in and you're able to settle and close all the affairs because you realize everything in the system is just commercial, right? And that's what you learn in the course. It's potent. So the idea is that if you've got some pre-existing um, encumbrances in that public system, then you can use equity to go in and clean your hands. You clean up those affairs, and then you come back into the private. And then you keep learning your powerful stances, like especially when you're navigating in trusts, right? You learn the power of a trustee, the power of determination that a trust has, which is its whole other level of centering. And if you're running into something where you just can't really manage the affair because you're still developing as a sophisticated trustee, then you just put on your bookkeeping hat and you navigate it with equity and you clean your hands and you come back into the private. So that's kind of the idea. So I wanted to set the
Don't
stage for
you?
that.
I was just going to say, my experience is we're supported in ways, again, when you get your internal game together more, even though you may not be on your A game yet as far as all the nuts and bolts, as far as the academics, somehow the universe only hands you what you can handle, and you seem to have success right off the bat. At least that was my experience.
I think that's very true. Just like
Mhm.
reading a book that you read 30 years ago, you read it with a whole new lens and
Right.
you're gaining the whole new level of wisdom. And this is no different. And, I say, folks, whatever pathway you're on, lean into it with full heart and you're going to glean the wisdom and the beauty out of it. And I think a lot of people, they don't follow through. They just kind of half dance into something. And, but really, perseverance and moving through something is where success lies, however you want to look at success or however you label it.
It's similar to healthcare. And, I took care of a lot of patients over the years, and there's a lot of folks that will come and go. And then, a number of people that will take it all away because they realize it takes a little bit of elbow grease on their,
Yeah,
half.
yeah.
And a lot of folks would, okay, what do I take? Fix me, that sort of thing. And they only get so far because they aren't participants in their own thing. And it's the same thing with our legal, lawful matters.
Yeah, equity is natural justice, and it's the way that it acts on the person. So it's to each one of us. I like what you said earlier, Dr. Bear, about letting go of the anger that, that a lot of times comes from frustration or not knowing the way, not knowing the way to embody that energy field of peace and equity is a sort of equality as well. It's the scales. It balances things out. So whenever there's a deficiency and the balance of the scales, that it's the way to bring it back into harmony. And so that's really what it's about. And it comes down to us to embody that energy field and be the one bringing the equity to the situation for everyone else for the universe in general to align with us and to create that fairness and that justness and making all parties whole. That's the beautiful thing about this equity is in this commercial system, as Michael's talking about, is we're able to make all parties whole and end the controversy. We don't have to argue about it. We don't have to fight about it. We literally bring the natural justice into the situation and it balances out and whenever there's an inequity. And that's the beautiful thing about it.
All right, so we've covered some great essence of this. Let's dive into a little bit more of the meat. So again, this is going to be different than what we've explored before with you guys. So Phil, so this is maybe what 15, 20 minutes, kind of exploring this more deeply, and then we really want to open it up to Q&A. We want to hear your curiosities.
Right. All right. Yeah, we're going to be talking about lawful versus legal. And I got a nice presentation to show everyone here. Let me get this shared. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, great.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. All right. So all information presented is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. All right. So I'm honored to be presenting equity jurisprudence, which is an exploration today into lawful substance versus legal form. We heard Mike mention that a minute ago. So it's really about substance versus form. And lawful is synonymous with substance, and legal is synonymous with form. And I'll show you where it says that inside the Black's Law Dictionary in a few minutes. But this presentation is really meant to explore the distinctions between lawful and legal and examine the role of equity within the framework. But first, if you haven't checked it out already, I'd like to start by introducing our new Equity Unveiled ebook, which is I'll be referencing throughout the presentation, but we're talked about going into the history and the nuts and bolts of equity, and this book really will introduce you to all of that. So I'm not going to go over that here necessarily. I'm going to touch on a couple points. But this book is really great. It contains over 30 pages, 39 to be exact, and it also shows how equity jurisprudence has been shrouded within the modern system. And it's a great foundational element to highlight the transformative principles that equity offers to us. And at the end of the presentation, or Mike already shared in the notes and the links to go and check out this ebook. And there's also another video that you can check out when you get the ebook. You'll have access to another video, which is about 30 minutes, which really dives in and actually shows some real life examples and also some testimonials. So some really great stuff there. But now let's get back on topic.
And can I just ask one thing, Phil?
Sure, sure.
When we're talking about equity, could we do so a lot of people get triggered by it now because of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh,
Right?
yes,
And
yes.
so people are like, what are you guys going into? Are you guys working for like the New World Order or something?
On the contrary, that's part of the shrouding that's occurred, is to, even in the newer versions of the law books, they're putting more of that social justice movement jargon and kind of shrouding equity even further. Equity is in the Constitution, actually, Article 3, Section 2. It's one of the three jurisdictions in the Constitution. It's how natural law essentially was brought into the justice system. So when the social justice movement is talking about equity, yeah, they're kind of piggybacking on some of the principles. However, if we look at some of the things that are going on, they're not necessarily equal to everybody and for the fairness and justness of everybody in the system, but they're aimed at that, and that's the messaging. So it kind of gets a little bit convoluted in there, but we're talking about the natural justice and how some movements chosen to message that and use it for their purposes is not the essence of how it exists in law and natural law. So thanks for that, Mike, because that is a constant kind of confusion. And again, the only way that the fictional system can prevent living sentient moral beings such as us to enforce our natural rights or to uphold our natural rights is to get us to believe that they don't exist, or plausible deniability is the number one tool that they have. So any way that can be shrouded or hidden is the point. So that's what we're here today, though, is to bring it back out. I'm going to show you in a few minutes where it's actually talked about in the meaning of lawful versus legal. And so we're heading that way. And just to all of you that are wondering about that question, we're gonna cover that in this presentation, which is great. So we're here to uncover the true meaning of law, and it's a three-letter word, Uh, but the definition or the meaning can change so much. The difference can be profound based on the context. So the word law, the first question we need to ask when the word law is used is what type of law, or what do you mean by that word? Because there's so many different meanings. For instance, there's 12,671 entries for the word law in Black's sixth edition. So talk about a word that's used so many different ways and so many different times. And law and can be used as a general term or also in a specific sense. Um, so it's very, very interesting that the meaning can vary significantly depending on the context, as I mentioned. So here is the main entry for the definition of law in Black's Law Dictionary. It spans an entire page encompassing numerous meanings and forms. So it's evident that the word law carries multiple interpretations, as you can see here. And it's also, guess what, written in complex language and often riddles that require careful analysis and cross-reference to truly understand what is actually being spoken of. So as to the different kinds of law that can be viewed in various aspects, we see I highlighted some of them here, but look at all the different types of law that are mentioned here. There's commercial law, common law, custom and usage, equity is listed here, maritime law as well, mercantile law, natural law, ordinance, statute, unwritten law, and written law. So each one of these types of law have their own distinct meaning and application. And there also exists a distinction between legal and lawful. And this is what we're going to delve into next. Now, a lot of people think these two words mean the same thing. And in fact, I've had conversations with people in the fictional system quite often, and they don't even understand that legal is something that's distinct from lawful. And in fact, a lot of us are kind of programmed to think that they're the same. So first, we're going to explore the word lawful, and we're going to go through the definition of it to gain a deeper understanding of the distinction. And I want you to notice as we read how the meaning shifts with the context that it's involved with. And this is a prime example of how the law can feel like it's written in riddles. So we look at this, is the right here is the definition of lawful out of Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition. And I'm going to start reading. We're going to go through little tidbits, and I'm going to unpack as we go. First, it starts off with lawful, and then we see the first word is legal. All right, and I want everyone to know that when you see a semicolon in the Black's Law Dictionary, that's actually a period in a separate thought. So literally, that they put the word legal immediately after lawful, and I want you to take notice of this because I'm going to talk more about it in a second. Now, lawful, legal, warranted or authorized by law, having the qualifications prescribed by law, not contrary to nor forbidden by the law, not illegal. And I said, take notice of the structure and wording of this first sentence because this is an intentional red herring and it's meant to mislead readers at the first glance. Because if you put the word legal immediately after lawful, this can cause cognitive overload and also can confuse people to thinking that these two are exactly the same thing. And that's what the intent is it's a riddle and it's intended to create confusion. So as I mentioned, the law is often written in riddles, and this is a prime example designed to plant misconceptions in the minds of those that don't continue to read. Well, we're going to continue to read. So let's continue on with the second paragraph. The principal distinction between the terms lawful and legal is that the former contemplates the substance of law, and the latter is the form of law. We only have to get to the second paragraph, so if you stopped reading after the first paragraph, you wouldn't get to see this, all right? Here we are. So lawful is substance, and legal is form. And substance is about the true meaning and purpose, and it's grounded in reality of what is actually lawful. Now, form is for appearance. It's for structure or presentation, and it exists in the realm of legal fiction. Now, let's continue on. To say of an act that it is lawful implies that it is authorized, sanctioned, or at any rate, not forbidden by law. Okay, so the word law, as I said, anytime it comes up, we have to think of the context. Now, reading on, to say that it is legal implies that it is done or performed in accordance with the forms and usages of law, or in a technical manner. So in this context, law refers specifically to what is lawful, while legal is explicitly a technicality of form. So in a legal sense, form of contracts and customs and usages, which are conventional. So let's read on. In this sense, illegal approaches the meaning of invalid. All right, they're telling us illegal is invalid. Okay, for example, a contract or will executed without the required formalities might be said to be invalid or illegal. So here we are, a contract or will executed without required formalities. That's what illegal is. So illegal only has to do with the contract. But this would not be described as unlawful. So legal refers to the formalities within the contract, as I mentioned, focusing on the contract itself and its surrounding procedures. So in short, legal is the law inside of the contract language. And this is distinct from natural law, which pertains to inherent lawful rights and wrongs. So let's continue on. Further, the word lawful more clearly implies an ethical content than does legal. The latter goes no further than to denote compliance with positive technical or formal rules, while the former usually imports a moral substance or ethical permissibility. Now note that lawful refers to natural law for sentient moral beings, while legal involves compliance with the law of the contract. So lawful is about substance and ethical permissibility, whereas legal establishes rules and binds individuals through technical contracts and forms. And any of you that's ever dealt with an attorney at law, you can probably vouch for the fact that ethical permissibility may not be at the top of their agenda list. And this is telling us why exactly right here. They're only concerned with technical contracts and forms. They're not lawful. They're at law, which means near the law. They're not in law. They're not lawful. Okay. So I hope you're starting to see the distinction here. Legal is about the contract and technicalities. So continuing on. And now a further distinction is that the word legal is used as a synonym of constructive, which lawful is not. Thus, legal fraud is fraud implied or inferred by law or made out by construction. Lawful fraud would be a contradiction of terms. Again, legal is used as the antithesis of equitable. So this is blinking red lights here, folks. Legal is the antithesis or the opposite of equitable. So keep in mind that legal fiction or form and equitable lawful substance are opposites. Equity and lawful are closely linked, however. Now, constructive refers to how words and intent combine to create meaning. How something is constructed determines how it should be construed or interpreted. So only legal can involve fraud, and it deals with form, and legal writings, contracts must be correctly constructed. So in contrast, lawful pertains to substance and does not operate within the realm of legal fiction. So think about this for a minute. The fraud can only exist in the language of the contract or the way that it's laid out. That's what construction is, essentially the wording or the language of the contract. So thus we speak of legal assets, legal estate, etc., but not of lawful assets or lawful estate. So legal title, which is a contractual assignment of ownership. Lawful, in contrast, relates to equitable title or the holding of substance. So who actually holds the substance? Now, for example, real estate involves legal title, a mere contract or piece of paper, while land represents substance with those who live on the land holding equitable title. Now for the final segment of the definition of lawful. There are some connections to which two words are used as exact equivalents, Thus, a lawful writ, warrant, or process is the same as a legal writ, warrant, or process. Now, it's telling us that this is one of the only times that the two words are used synonymously, legal and lawful. And this is because of the distinction being blurred by procedural rules. So when common law procedures switched over to the federal rules of procedure, the sheriff, which is the lawful authority, serves the process or writ in both instances. So that's why the lines got blurred in this one area. However, anytime the word legal is used, you ought to know that this is referring to a contract, and there's probably fraud existing in the contract, whereas lawful applies to the substance and the natural rights and the inherent rights and the unalienable rights, which I'll talk more about in just a minute. So, as I said, clear distinctions between legal and lawful. Now, let's focus on the reason we're here today. Of course, equity jurisprudence. Now, we just saw that equity is the antithesis of legal, the opposite. Equity is the lawful substance, while legal is contractual form. So equity as lawful substance is all-encompassing, rooted in nature and reality, where legal contractual form, on the other hand, exists only in the language of the contract, fiction, and formality. So sharpening the ability to decipher the riddles of the law is known in our community as seeing with equity eyes. And this process involves relearning how to operate lawfully within the legal system by understanding and applying equity principles. But this requires proper studying and internalization. You heard Mike talking about it earlier about the being vigilant and not slumbering. We actually perish for our lack of knowledge, and ignorance is no excuse for the law, for not knowing the law. And that's one of the maxims as well. We may be ignorant of a few of the facts, but as far as being ignorant of the law, that's not allowed. So it's up to us, each one of us, to step up and develop our equity eyes and be able to see where equity exists in the system. Because equity operates as a private remedy, and it's inherently incompatible with the public realm, as the two are oil and water and do not mix. So by joining our private community, we can openly explore and discuss this and other lawful topics together, as the private is where the private remedies and the lawful remedies are shared in the most protected environment, as public cannot be involved in private affairs as long as it stays in the private. So that I want to move on now to examine the maxims of law and equity. And this leads to the understanding of the principles of law and equity that are agreed on and accepted by all. The principles found in the maxims provide the wisdom to create law, interpret law, and decide law. And a maxim, what is a maxim? A maxim is so called because its dignity is chiefest, and its authority the most certain because it's universally approved by all. So maxims are those principles that have stood the test of time, that literally are the bedrock of decision making and how to interpret laws, how to figure out what is lawful and what is substance. And if you notice maxims of law and equity holds such a special place that they separated it from the word law in this instance to show the distinction of the place equity holds. And I want to show you one of the maxims of equity here. And we've been highlighting this throughout the presentation. Equity looks at the substance rather than the form. So we're being told that equity is acting on the substance and not the legal formalities. Legal form is literally simply a reflection of lawful substance. It's a fictional representation. The natural law, which equity operates through, holds the highest place in substance, and form cannot exist without substance. As Michael was saying earlier, literally they can create this formality just to mimic the real thing, so they can try to control nature, try to put us below them. And Dr. Bear talked about that as well, that when we know who we are, this fictional, we need to make our own self-determined decisions, and the fiction will roll right off of us when we embody that position. I want to bring up this quote from Alfred Denning, and he was an esteemed English barrister. He was on the King's Council in the Admiralty division, and he lived for 100 years and earned numerous prestigious merits in the British justice system. He even authored several books on law and was an expert in admiralty, common law, and equity. One of his notable quotes on equity is, "Equity is not a body of rules. It is a spirit that permeates the whole system of law." So the statement, "the whole system of law," is a powerful assertion coming from someone who sat on the Admiralty division most of his career. Very interesting there. And well, before we continue any further, let's review what's been covered thus far. So legal's form, lawful substance. Legal is subject to law and the contract, and lawful is authorized in law and equity under natural order. Legal is the antithesis of equity, or the opposite, and lawful is aligned with equity. Legal is based on formalities and rules, and lawful is ethical and morally based. The distinction between legal, equitable, and lawful is becoming clear, isn't it? Well, now let's explore what the legal system of form looks like currently. And here we are. Admiralty maritime law and the role of at law, which I already said was near the law, and the legal, these are key points to note, because legal form translates to legal fiction, governed by Admiralty maritime law, which oversees trade and commercial contracts. And this includes statutes, codes, enactments, mandates, ordinances, and other legal fictions. While the fiction may seem real when engaged with the legal system, it simply remains a construct based on contract, because legal is inside of the contract. Legal formalities and language define the contract's terms, establishing the law of the contract to be enforced under Admiralty maritime jurisdiction. Now, this is how legal fiction gains jurisdiction over the matter. Now, at law, as I mentioned, is near the law and not inside of the law. Attorneys are employed at or near the law, not in law. And if you see the term at used in a legal context, know that this is a term of legal form and not lawful substance. And here's another important maxim of equity. Equity does not allow a statute to be made an instrument or cloak of fraud. See, the lawful substance of equity ensures that legal form and legal rules will not violate natural equitable rights, unless a contract created with consent exists to sanction it. Now, to better understand why this maxim applies to the current system, let's look briefly back to 1933 in the US when the money changed. So this is covered more in the ebook Equity Unveiled, so please read that to find out more about this. But this is when the substance was switched from gold and silver to, you guessed it, Michael touched on this earlier, us. We're the substance in the system. So this was the inequity that is not in alignment with natural law, because there is making, they did away with unwilling servitude, so they had to replace that with willing servitude or voluntary servitude. And this is a huge change that happened in that process. So this is where the public debt system came into effect. They call it the credit system, but it's actually a debt system. And I want to draw attention real quick to Article 1, Section 10, for which I mentioned a little as I was talking about Section 3, or sorry, Article 3, Section 2, where equity is mentioned, but this is about the gold and silver. So right here in the Constitution, it says that nothing but gold and silver can be used for payment of debts. So now that gold and silver aren't around anymore, we can't pay for anything anymore. And that's covered more in the ebook as well. But I want to draw special attention to the last sentence here. Law pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. So laws cannot be passed to impair the obligation of contracts or the form. So to simplify, the money changed, however, the law of the contract obligation remains in full effect. So in the legal system of form compensated for by this monumental shift in substance, we have the House Joint Resolution 192, Public Law 7310, which removed the substance and replaced it with legal form named legal tender, which is actually IOUs based on the people's energy. So this shift in substance to the sweat equity of the nation's people created the inequitable, unlawful situation that we're currently involved in. So I also want to compare the money before 1933 and after 1933. On top, we have the money, the paper money backed by substance, which is gold. And then on the bottom, we have the post 1933 Federal Reserve note, which is a paper note, an IOU, a form of debt. Now, the Fed note is legal tender, a creation of legal form. So equity provides the lawful authority to balance the substance over the form, even in the system that we're currently in. Now, as I'm sharing about history of the United States, a common question that comes up, and I want to address really quickly, is the common question is, does equity exist and work in other nations? And, the answer is a resounding yes, as there are many community members that are having success in other nations, such as Canada, Australia, and Ireland, to name a few. So remember that natural law is the only law man can agree on across natural boundaries. It is the genesis of the law of nations. Now, common law and civil law are both based in equity, and this makes up the foundation of law in approximately 140 nations worldwide currently. And equity is the civil remedy, and it plays an important role and is alive and well in most justice systems worldwide. So keep that in mind. And I want to move this to the next maxim. Equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. Equity will not permit public policy to serve as a cloak for defrauding the nation's people. So right here, this is where our remedy comes from. A remedy must be provided to uphold lawful and equitable principles. So this brings us to the lawful tools for the equitable remedy that is available to us due to this injustice. Equity provides the tools to free ourselves from the fictional system and also to the charges of the commercial debt-based system and that are designed to encumber and control. And the first tool is the principle of discharge. It is a natural mechanism for settling public debts and contract obligations. And this is the primary tool to honor the system and provide the remedy that for the injustice or the inequity rather that was created by the money change. The second tool is the dissolution of public contracts, and this is a remedy to release individuals from the binding obligations of public contracts. And the third tool is the power of inquiry. This allows you to expose the legal fiction behind the charges by questioning the lawful nature. We talked about the legal only works in the form, but we can inquire into the lawful nature of the matter without arguing or making claims. It's very peaceful. And we have this equity maxim, that which is equitable and right is the law of laws. And this reflects the power of equity and provides these tools for us when we need them. So to have the power necessary to disencumber yourself from the trappings of the legal and commercial system, where public legal charges and commercial debt burdens are designed to weigh down and pressure, and see through the legal fictional form and disencumber yourself from applying your true lawful substance, which is within your power, and free your time and energy to focus on the things that really matter, and encompass liberty and self-governance through the knowledge of equity jurisprudence, and embark on the lawful journey into equitable justice. And here is the pathway to learn and embody lawful justice and take your next step forward. And we have a special invitation to receive this ebook and also watch a special video presentation and step into the private so we can share more with you, more details on how exactly this works. And the pathway to realize lawful substance is here. So we want to invite you in and receive the ebook and learn more immediately. And it's a very valuable resource. I also have an exciting announcement. Well, Mike already alluded to this, but it's a great honor for us here at the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship to be welcomed into the Alfa Vedic community. So for the next 48 hours, or if you're rewatching this on YouTube, it may go a little longer than that. So definitely check it out. We created this $500 off the donation to enroll in the Equity Passage, and please use the code Alpha500 to redeem this special invitation. And the links have been shared by Mike in the chat. Definitely navigate through the link there and use the special code Alpha500. And when you enter the code into the site, you got to push a little green check mark to apply the code, because sometimes people put the code in and don't apply it, and then it doesn't apply to the cart. and it cut, and then we have to go back and fix it later. So just make sure to hit the check mark when you do it. And also, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a great honor presenting equity jurisprudence and lawful versus legal for all of you today. And together, we're building a bridgeway to self-governance. And that's the end of my presentation. So I'd love to open up for discussion and questions. And I'll stop sharing. Let's see here. All right, there we go.
Fantastic.
All right.
Yeah, so you see that it's gone in several more layers, and Phil is just getting into more of the details of that process of looking through equity eyes to understand those distinctions. And it really is a discipline, almost like a martial art or a martial practice or an art practice, I'm sorry, where you're in it enough, and then you can start seeing it for yourself. And it might seem daunting at first, but really you could go through the course one time, and by the time you go through it the second time, you're seeing with a whole new set of eyes and a whole different lens. And it's empowering. It's empowering to know these simple truths.
Yeah, I
You
love
know,
that you said.
Absolutely. And that was an amazing encapsulation, Phil. Thank you. So go ahead, Mike. You're about to say something.
I was just going to say one thing that's interesting when you're talking about the money change in the court system here in the US. And I was thinking about the UK because you were mentioning that one was a chancellor. They had very defined courts, right? They literally had an equity court. I think it was called the Court of Chancery, and then they had the Star Chamber and the county courts, and they had the Court of Admiralty. And actually, I was reading Charles Dickens recently, and David Copperfield in that book. He's actually working in the Doctors' Commons, and there's different courts involved there with. So it was very defined. And then we have here in the United States, we just have civil courts. We have basically you go to court, and then you have Supreme Court. And could you explain that a little bit for people that these are basically all commercial admiralty courts, right? But we can bring equity jurisprudence into those. We don't have a specific court of chancery specifically for equity, but it can travel into those. Would you mind explaining that a bit?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So back before 1940, the early 40s is when the rules of civil procedure came in. Federal rules of civil procedure. Now, federal only has jurisdiction. There's no federal common law. It only has jurisdiction over Admiralty Maritime, trade, and commerce. So in order for it to be uniformly applied nationwide, state common law had to step back into the procedure. So in came Admiralty Maritime, which is an administrative court. They're appointed by the legislatures of the state. They're not even Article 3. They're not in equity or common law. Now it's kind of, you got to think of it this way. It's that the modern courthouses are kind of like a general practitioner doctor, where you go in there and you're going to see the general practitioner, which is Admiralty Maritime, and then you're going to need to get a referral essentially to move on to one of the other jurisdictions that exists in the courthouse. And equity is alive and well in the courthouse. And sometimes it's the same judge that is authorized to administer equity. And sometimes they take you to another courtroom that may not even have a gold fringe flag in it, and nobody else is in there. And they wheel out someone who doesn't normally even see cases, and they usually have gray hair, and they're usually the oldest person in the courthouse. And now you're in front of the chancery. And that's how it works. They're in the courthouse. They have to be. If we look up Article 3, Section 2, common law, equity, and Admiralty Maritime, they're all required in the justice system. There's different jurisdictions. And so it's more like it's been shrouded and buried as much as possible. And you can't go in the courthouse and say, hey, I'm here for equity. They're going to say, according to the rules of civil procedure, equity's been merged with the other forms, but they're not jurisdictionally wise, but procedurally, and that's the distinction. So anyway, we have to go in there and do equity to receive it, and that's the most important thing, is embodying it with the energy field we're talking about. You have to show up in your conduct as to exhibit equity so that you can be sent to the equity in the courthouse. And that's essentially how it's set up, and that happened with the money change. And it talked about in the ebook. Definitely grab the ebook, and it talks about the money change, and then it talks about how the law changed in Tompkins v. Erie Railroad in 1938. And then in the course, of course, Mike and Dr. Bear have been through the course, but we talked briefly about the federal rules of procedure and how that changed and how all of that works. And when we understand this, we can receive equity by doing equity. First of all, there's a maxim that says, in order the one seeking equity must do equity.
Hmm.
So it's incumbent on us to be vigilant, to know this and to go in there and do it. And that's what we're here to share with everyone.
So I wanted to share something, and before I do, are there some questions coming up? I can't see like the Q&A or anything like that. I don't know if people are asking questions, but I would encourage people to ask questions, maybe put them in bold so it's easy for us to see.
I
Or
asked them to put it in all caps,
oh, all caps. Yeah, there
and
you
I'm
go.
mainly focused on the Rumble chat here. I'll
Cool.
check on Facebook. And yeah, it's Restream's supposed to show it all in one place, but it's not working. So I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, this is a great opportunity to ask us here in the chat, and put them in all caps. And then I mean, I'm sure Bear and I have a million questions as well. I mean, you can go so deep with this, but yeah, continue.
So we were this last portion here, the past few minutes, we were talking about courtrooms and jurisdictions, and I love the analogy you were saying, Phil. It's like it's like a uh, uh, the primary physician where you're walking in, and then it's your job as the substance to know how you want to navigate it from that point forward. So what I wanted to share is that the vast majority of the circumstances that when people are expressing equity and they're what I call expressing their sovereign state, you're not finding yourself in the courtroom. You're navigating through things, through the affairs, through administrative process. So um, I just wanted to share that because a lot of people get that people want to avoid the courtroom like the plague, and we get it. We totally get it. It's like not a very fun place for most people, and I say most people because some people actually love it, especially when they start getting really sharp. Um, anyway, so that's not the case for most people. So don't panic if that is a panic button for you. So
Well, and one thing too that I really enjoyed with learning equity is that, and in law in general, is it's okay to mess up. If you, as long as you're honest and you go through the right lawful, standing in honor, right, and through that having the, as Phil was saying, holding equity into the deep, deep recesses of your being, and you mess up because you don't know one of the process or something, and you can we could touch on rescission, right, and repent, like we talk about in the Bible, and start over. And so a lot of those fears that people have, I think, of going into court around messing up and then being held accountable and thrown in jail. I think those examples are people that didn't truly understand equity or how to embody it. They were going into battle. Is that correct?
a great point.
That, that's typically what the energy field's so important because again, the one seeking equity must come with clean hands. That's another maxim. You must have clean hands to receive equity, and you also must be doing equity. And if you're not, if your energy field's showing combative nature or argument or any kind of controversy, then that enters you into the duel, I call it. Back in the day, if someone's in dishonor, they got slapped with the glove, and then you were in a duel, right? And someone usually gets shot or injured, and that's the point of a duel. However, if you're in honor and you conduct your affairs in honor and your conduct, it's all about conduct. That's ultimately how our intent and our actions and our deeds are all encapsulated in the word conduct. That's how we show up and we navigate the system. And if we're dishonorable whatsoever, you can expect to be in the duel and you can expect that there's a high chance of being injured and it's going to be a tumultuous experience. Whereas if you show up in honor and you don't get the glove slap across the face and you don't do it to them and you just show up in honor there to settle the matter, and then it's peaceful and you can go to peace over it. You can let go of the anger. I was angry in my earlier life, just like Dr. Bear was talking about. We had, because we're in this unjust system, that there's another saying I heard, that's the slave resists, okay? So if we
Mhm.
have that mentality that we're under oppression and we resist and we fight, that's exactly what they want us to do because of the Trading with the Enemy Act and enemy combatants and all of that. That's a trap. They want us to fall into it because then they can do whatever, they can do their worst to us with our ignorance in place. But when we replace ignorance with vigilance and knowledge, then we see those traps before we step into them, and we can navigate and just avoid all that stuff. And again, it's a different jurisdiction. We don't have to step into theirs. We don't argue the jurisdiction ever, but we just conduct ourselves in the jurisdiction of natural law and equity. And then it's a parallel, and we don't have to be involved in any of that other stuff that, the controversy and the arguing.
I'll say, yeah, Marcia Ann I was the first to hear this from her when she came to Alfa Vedic, was that resistance is persistence, which really falls right in line with like just electrical engineering, like that, right? And just like we're talking about energy here, right? Yeah. And it's interesting that we talk about, and Bear could probably go off on this, but we're talking about discharge as the means for coming to out of controversy or to get out of debt. And that's literally how the natural world works with electricity and energy. That's how it dissipates, it discharges. So in some weird ways, and this is where my question's going, it seems like in 1933, they were hip to the real way the world works. They just manipulated it for their own power. But like, it seems like there's a lot of genius behind having a public credit system if it's done in an equitable way. And maybe that is a potential path forward in the future. And Bear's mentioned this on past AlphaCast, like this idea of having our credit be applied in a way instead of relying upon even like gold, which often fed to the wealthy, the haves versus the have-nots, those who could go mine it, those who could accrue it, right? But the one thing I always have questions about is like you were going into Black's Law and you were showing the red herring right in the definition of law. Why does this stuff have to be so occulted? I think that's where people kind of get lost too. It's like, why is this all occulted? Isn't this, and then why do they even have to then put it in? Why can't they completely deceive us and just hide it all? Why do they, it's like a weird thing where they have to show it, but then they try to hide it. You know what I'm trying to get at here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's because of natural law. They have to be in alignment with natural law, and that's why equity will exist, and that's why it has to be upheld, because they don't want to be not only this, they have to be in alignment with natural law because of the principles. I'm reading those maxims. That applies to everybody. That's not just a select few. In fact, there's a reason why it's called color of law, because it applies to the freed slaves or the voluntary servitude. Color law, they used to refer to people with darker skin, okay? Now, but they made this law that can fool anybody who doesn't really know. It's a riddle, like I'm talking about. So they have to leave the door open for themselves. They have to have law protecting them as well. If they do away with it, it applies to them just like it does to us. There's a maxim that says the law doesn't look to work a wrong or create an injury. And so that's ultimately where our remedy lies, as well as the promise that when we build a record of honor and equity, the law cannot create a wrong or injure us in that state. We can only do it to ourselves. And so it all comes down to our personal, that's why we talk about self-determination and self-governance, because it's all existing here inside of us to begin with. So that to answer your question, it's just contrary to natural law. And they have to uphold it, not only for us, but for them. Because there's consequences in nature if you don't uphold natural law, and that's no one wants to be in that position.
They need a get out of karma free card.
Yeah.
And legal, I look at it just if you mirror the way the rest of our realm works. It's a one-way explosive technology or explosive. And it's up to us to bring it full circle into a self-renewing system. And that's, what I believe equity is. I have a question. How might equity be employed for a large group of people that are being abused? For instance, or maybe ask it this way, is there an equitable equivalent to like a class action sort of affair? And what I have in mind is, in a few weeks, we're going to have a wonderful woman from Maui, my old home, who's leading the charge against exposing, the bureaucracy over there and what really happened in those Maui fires. And in the meantime, the native population has been it was a land grab. And so now after the fact, they are not even allowed to get back into their old property and rebuild. So where does equity come in, in that kind of situation? And I get that it's an individual job. We all have to free ourselves individually, but have you ever witnessed a group of people employ these principles as a group in any kind of situation?
Yeah, well, equity acts on the person, not only on us as a person, but also the officials, the public officials. It acts on the private person, so that they're not clothed in office; they become vulnerable personally. Now, with the money change, what happened was the substance shifted, and so there used to be bills in equity where you could bill somebody for like a civil matter. However, because of the money change, they can discharge it on their end, change the dynamics as far as that goes. And in that system, that inherently system built on legal fiction and controversy and arguing and things like that, what the tool we have for compelling performance is the inquiry. So we build a record. So each one of those people individually can build a record and against what someone else is doing that's not lawful. We read about that in the presentation. There's lawful and there's natural law, and there's things that are just inherently right, and there's things that are fraudulent, and those are fall into the legal field. So we build a record, and that record, nobody wants to have that tied to them. And so again, this is essentially equity is the best way to be left alone in this commercial system, the way it's created right now. As far as offensive action, there are other remedies. For instance, Marsha Ann, for instance, has some really nice ones that can work in the system and get some offensive action going. So not to say that equity is the way to go after something like that. You can compel performance with inquiry, but as far as like what's kind of programmed into our system is like of course, what happened in Maui would qualify as an injury, but you got to look at these things. Is it wrong or is it an injury? Because sometimes people get arrested and thrown in jail overnight. And, that may be wrong, but did it really create an injury? But they come out and say they were kidnapped and they want everybody to live in a refrigerator box under the bridge because they went to jail for a night. So you got to, again, look at that situation. And that situation you're speaking on, there's plenty to inquire into in the lawful nature of what those people did and to make them liable. And when by their silence, their acquiescence, you can actually take contractual action against them and make them liable. And that's the point. So there are remedies available. And, at the fellowship, equity is one of the big remedy for like being left alone in the private. However, we have other remedies that are more often, can be used in those situations to explore. So I would encourage that, and equity is always available to balance the scales. And we do it through inquiry because there is an incumbent duty on somebody when they're inquired into to provide the information. If they don't, then that's a dishonor in itself. And so building that record, the record proves, and we build the record, and that's how we win every time with that.
Yeah.
So
That's a really, really great question. I love that you posed that. So what Phil is saying, like in short, if I can encapsulate it, is the art of inquiry. The query is what creates the body of evidence. In this kind of a situation, this is just an avenue, right? It creates the body of evidence, and then you can practice due process of law. You could express due process of law through affidavits, which is the highest truth of the law. So you can take all these evidence, you can move them into affidavits, and that's when you now have a tort claim against somebody for there's a true injury there. So there's two sides of that process, and we're actually just finishing up a course that's administrative process as due process of law. So it's the expression of due process using affidavits. So we're actually going to be finished with the filming of it this Saturday, and then we're going to turn it into a course and release it in the coming weeks. So
if let me see if I get this right. So equity, from my perspective, is really like the prime defense. Is like the martial art, like qigong, or that's not the right one. Like
Aikido.
Judo.
Aikido.
Yeah, judo, right, where they coming at you and you're using their energy to deflect, using the mirroring process, using the accept and return, right, as the ultimate defense. But then we can use that in conjunction with a more offensive strategy, like we're talking about the affidavit, to actually hold then somebody accountable for doing harm.
Yep. You're
Yeah.
expressing.
So an offensive strategy might require a hybridized approach of sorts.
Yeah, just because we're talking about different jurisdictions here, like the waiver of
Right.
tort would be more of a common law administrative, entering into due process. So that's a little bit different. So you wouldn't want to mix them in the same event necessarily, but you can
Mhm.
Mhm.
choose which tool is going to be the most, the most fitting for the situation. And when you create a
Mhm.
waiver of tort, you're in an affidavit. An affidavit's not something we do in equity because it's essentially a testimony or a claim, and and when we silence the claim, so you just have to look at what tool in the box is the right one, but you wouldn't want to mix. It's like mixing religions if you mix them on the same, or speaking two different languages, and expecting someone to understand that, and it's going to cancel each other out. So you just have to you have to decide from the beginning, and you have to stick with the process that you commit to.
Understood.
And so we have some questions too. I think it kind of parlays into some of this. So first and foremost, Jopo69 asked, why is the US still under the bar system then of the Brits, the British Accredited Registry?
Well, the definition of an attorney is somebody that's there to take back the estate, okay, or manage the estate for the landlord, so to speak. So because we're under Senate Document 43 and the state owns all the property because of the foreclosure and the bankruptcy, the attorneys are here to ensure that the property is administered for the real legal title holder, which is the state, or there's some speculation on who's actually behind that, but Senate Document 43 is clear about its intent. So attorneys are an extension of this fictional system, and they work in the world of legal form, and they're here to contract us into voluntary servitude, essentially, and administer the estate. And that's why when you go into court, they always want to stick an attorney on you immediately, because the attorneys actually have the number one duties to the court, the number two duties to the public, and the number three duties to their client, which even if you're paying them. So that's how that system's set up. It's just to ensure that the fictional system operates in the correct manner, and that they're administering all their affairs in the estates correctly. So that's why that's happening. And when we lawfully, we're in this road to take back these things, to redeem. Equity has the power of redemption, to redeem property, whether it be chattel, which is what they call us, chattel, or if it's land or whatever the case may be, we can redeem it all. But we have to claim our estate back, so those attorneys have no right to be in there managing things for us.
And if there's enough people that express this, that's what changes the commons. That's what changes the,
Right.
I forget the word that you use often.
Custom.
Yeah, custom. Thank you. There it is.
That's
Yeah.
something that I gleaned out of this course, because we talk about, for instance, the TSA. Don't we love those folks?
Mm-hmm.
And how they were able to initiate through custom the things like the body scanners. Well, when that originally was brought forth after 9/11, those were totally optional from the very beginning. And then as they developed the custom, where everybody just sort of went with it and agreed to it, it got further encapsulated and crystallized into society, to where they made it harder and harder and harder to opt out. Because does that have to do with just consensus of the public mainly? And they use that to basically create this custom, which is fiction, though.
Yes, yes, fiction law works through enactment and convention. Enactment, of course, is the statutes, codes, anything passed legislatively, and convention has to do with custom and usage. So if everyone uses something habitually consents to it, then it becomes a sort of law, which actually there's a maxim that says custom supersedes common law. So that custom is a powerful force, and that's what they're operating on. That's why in the courthouse, they'll cut out, there's 60 steps to get through the justice system. They'll cut out 30 of them and abbreviate it and try to contract everybody through, expedite the process. And custom, it becomes customary. And then you go, customs kind of like the music in the dance club, and then all of a sudden you come in and go, hey, I'm applying equity, and the record scratches and everybody stops dancing. That's because equity is the only thing that can supersede custom. And so when we come in there, Mike, we're talking about due process, and then the other process we're talking about also, they have to walk through every step of the process, and they're not used to it. So that's what they hang themselves by trying to run down the road, and we're like, hey, hold on a second, you skipped 10 steps, and now it's on the record. Okay, is it the custom of this court to deny my due process by not allowing me to speak, or by allowing someone else to speak on my behalf without my consent? That's an attorney if trying to stand up and talk for you and things like that. So yes, custom is very powerful in what you're using. They're doing the facial scanner thing now. And I went through a checkpoint a couple weeks ago that everybody was just stepping up and getting there. And I walk up and I go, hey, I opt out of this process. Can I go talk to the agent over there? And the woman's like, didn't know what to say. And then I just kind of walked over to the agent who was standing behind her, and here's my papers. And the guy didn't even want to look at them, just waved me through. But we can still say I don't opt in to these type of things.
They also have to
However,
notice you in the beginning, right, Phil? So right now they are still noticing you, at
Yes.
least in the general TSA face thing. I've gone
Mhm.
through multiple times traveling a lot now, and I was with Alex Zek, actually. We're going to Australia, and we both opted out, and it was no problem. Every other chattel coming through, and so it's so important, you guys, to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a good question is if it's an official situation, you say I mentioned mandatory in the presentation. We've all heard of mandates. Okay, a mandate can only exist with a contract. You can only be compelled through contract to comply with a mandate. However, so it's voluntary, or is this mandatory or voluntary is a question to ask an official. And if it's less official, you can say, is this optional or required? And that's a little bit less, it's a little more the nomenclature works a little more with a bureaucrat or somebody. If you're at the doctor's office and they want some information, is this optional or required? And usually it's optional. So we don't have to volunteer, and they set us up to volunteer automatically, like you're talking about the facial scan. Like they set us up so that if we don't know better, we just volunteer for it, where we always have a choice.
I love that.
Wonderful thing is unveiling right now, though, the more aggressive the predators become, the more people are waking up. For instance, I'm delighted just having a talk like this out in the open. My first foray into all this was back in Hawaii. I was involved with the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, and one of my early mentors brought me into a very close circle of folks to, begin learning some of this because we needed to practically employ this for what we're trying to do. And we had to be very guarded and private, as far as sharing this information. A decade or two later, I was going to seminars where there's auditoriums of people that were learning this. Now it's open news over the internet. And, as they get ready to unveil the next bird flu or whatever, there's just too many people that it's not going to be a consensus anymore. So I feel very optimistic. In the past, I had my doubts. I felt like I was Planet of the Apes, and you're just outnumbered, and you just go, live in a cave somewhere. But the worm is turning. It really is. So that's another thing I think of value for every single individual that steps into this work, because they're contributing to that overall critical mass. And I think we're a lot closer to the big shift than we could possibly imagine. And equity will just be, I think we can have a legal system. And if it's balanced by equity and, like more acknowledged as you're talking about in the old days, and also accessible to commoners, not to the elites of, Britain, we're there. We just have to recognize we're conduits for a new radiance that is actually going to create the shift.
Yeah, and it called the new custom, right? We can establish just convention
Right.
is the habitual usage. So we can establish a new custom, one of equity, one of honor, one of fair dealings between living sentient moral beings, and that's what we're aiming for. And the more people that learn this, we're creating that paradigm shift right now, and people are waking up just like to the natural medicine, to what you showed earlier about,
Yeah.
digesting the turkey dinner. Okay, we're waking up to these natural things, and natural law equity is at the foundation of all of society. And so not only is it food, not only is it medicine, it's also law. And so that's what we're here to offer people.
Truth and
And our
balance.
side,
Truth and
sorry, I was just
balance.
going to say it. Yeah.
Go
And it's
ahead.
so much, yeah, I was just going to say quickly, it's so much easier for us because we're drafting natural design and we've got the universe at our back. And the predator class that has tried to run contrary to that, it's really been an uphill swim for them from day one. And at this point, I think even a lot of them are realizing it's futile, which is why they're just trying to upset the whole, game board. So, yeah.
Uh, Go ahead, Michael, but I will say this is sort of opening up one of the inquiries I have for this show, and it is really a conjecture point, but about in 1933, they pulled some hijinks. Is it time again? Is there going to be some new chicanery, some new,
Yeah.
new, because they're always trying to stay ahead of the game, right? And so the question are we going to see something new with the commercial system or some new form of law? I mean, or is the game over?
I think that depends on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Good
doesn't
answer.
depend on them. Yeah.
Hmm.
And if history repeats itself, the Federal Reserve came in 1913. They put out Federal Reserve notes concurrently with gold-backed currency, and then it took 20 years until they yanked the rug and made the switch. And so we can see that with CBDCs right now, that they're messing with the money. BlackRock's one of the biggest owners of Bitcoin, for instance. So they're trying to privatize the money and take it out of the national hands altogether, and so there won't be any regulation whatsoever or anybody that's involved, because that Federal Reserve Act can be unmade just like it was made. But when this next switch happens, it may not be the case, as far as that process goes. So that's covering their tracks. And the Father Rothschild has a quote that says, "I care not for who writes the laws. I only care for who controls the money." And so when you control the currency, so if history is going to repeat itself, it's going to be concurrent with CBDCs, with the old system, and then there'll be another financial crisis, and oh, we got to switch to this now, and that really becomes the time where the mark of the beast, and you can't trade or do business unless you're in the system then. And so, and Michael said it depends on us, and we can head that off, but we need to wake up just like we are, and we need to educate ourselves just like we are, and we need to change that custom and make it so our strong private parallel communities have resilience, and we're also educated, and this isn't going to fly again. We're not going to play the same old rerun.
Holding the line.
Yeah, that's what our mission statement is and why we do everything we do, just creating a little microcosm of our own of,
Mm-hmm.
how you can create your own system within the system. And my optimism is also tempered with, I think, a pretty good certainty that these guys aren't going to quit. So we
Well,
definitely have to be on our A game.
I'll
That's
just
true.
say for all you Bitcoin maximalists out there or believers, and actually shout out to Roger Ver, who has been questioning this, and he was, very fundamental with trying to keep Bitcoin as money, but it was co-opted a long time ago. I've talked about this on many shows. And we got Trump now talking about potentially trying to buy up a third of Bitcoin and turn it,
Mm-hmm.
and there, like you said, BlackRock has its hands in it, and it's actually more tracking and traceable than the traditional dollar. It could actually really put you into a silo of control that is their wet dream. And so, and this is going to maybe move right into this other question we have from the chat here, which is really practical, and I think it's one it's a good one. But in terms of what we're talking about here today, we're talking about the defenses from this system so that we can grow and create the new, the parallel systems, our own currencies, our own beautiful natural design systems, so that we aren't playing in this anymore. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes, and we've brought some people on the show in the past, and we have people in our scene that are talking about weaponizing this for their own, benefit, which is, and that's and they can justify that by taking down the system with their own weapons or whatever. But with equity, we are reminded to be very cautious around that. Is that correct, Phil, in terms of how we use equity?
Yeah, yes, prudence is one of the things prudence is very important to know the way out. And again, a lot of these moves, it's more like chess than it is checkers. You have to contracts. We're talked about how it's based on contracts. You have to understand the web of contracts, because if you're still tied in, and that's really how the system works. You're tied in the contracts that you don't even remember that you're in, or you have no idea that you're even in, and they could be implied, they could be expressed, they could be explicit. But you could, people check boxes on the internet all the time and forget about it. So really about being self-governing means, the difference between private and public mainly is what contracts you enter into, who you're in contract with. And if we continue to contract with the public and the state and all these commercial entities, then we always end up in the debtor role if we contract with them. That's the way it works, to receive something in return. So starting to contract privately with other sentient moral beings and conduct our affairs in the private, the privacy right of says that we have the right to conduct our intimate affairs and our affairs without involvement of the public, as long as they are not concerned in what we're doing. So that's one thing we do at the fellowship as well, is we instruct people on how to be in the private and not fall into these pitfalls through the contracting game. So that's the crux of it. And so knowing when to apply equity is key, because it's a malleable remedy, and sometimes we need to understand all of the ramifications. Are we ready to let go of the benefit? For instance, I get a question all the time about Social Security benefits and veteran benefits and things like that. Those are going to the LLC, the fictional citizen, okay? And the sentient moral being is the beneficiary of those, but it can also be the surety. So you need to look at those. You need to understand the contract. You don't have to do away with them. You can choose, am I going to apply equity right here, which could potentially mean I lose my Social Security benefits? No, you don't have to make that decision at this point, but to be aware of it is what we're talking about. And if you need to, because you don't want to be obligated to any kind of exchange with that entity, then that may be something to consider as well. But there's no reason to do things in your life before you're ready. And then we talk about journeying into the private. Each one of us has a different road. We all have to make the decision what steps we take in our life. And the bigger the step, the more prudent we need to be that we're ready for it, because there's some people that have gone too fast and then realize, oh no, I can't do anything now, because they weren't ready for it. But when you're ready, then take the step when you're ready, and that's the point.
And those of us that run businesses and have a sizable presence in the public, because we have to, do trade out there just in order to conduct ourselves, it can be a little challenging, because the money system is how they get us all. But we're learning that you in fact can be in the world, but not of it. And I think that's what I hear you saying there.
Right.
And they're closing down trust accounts. We had a trust account and at a credit union, and they shut that down. Another bank did the same thing. So I think for people to move into this, that's the biggest stumbling block for, people that want to be in private business, but then are, I don't want to say dependent, but still need to move money around so that they can get their supplies. And like with us, we do a lot of trading with a lot of people all over the world. So it's possible, it's doable, but I'd say for the average person in a more simple situation, it's an easier place to start.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. I think this is a good one to just because I think this really feeds a lot of people that are new to this. Like, why would I sign up for this course? What is the point? You know, I get the deep spiritual meaning, but I have stuff to deal with. I got bills to pay, etc. So, what are some practical examples demonstrating the usefulness of this, and why does it work when the system is so corrupt? And we've kind of been explaining that, but maybe just to encapsulate that finally with maybe an example of literally in wielding this equity in a, you know, in as an example of a presentment or something.
Yeah, yeah. So we talked about a martial art. The martial art I like to compare it to is Aikido. So the charge comes at you. It's like a light bulb too. The charge goes to the light bulb. The discharge lights up the light bulb. Or in Aikido, the discharge is a flip on the ground. Okay, so when they send a charge at us, we discharge it. That applies to all public matters. One of the some practical applications, a lot of people are mired down in credit card debt, for instance, or their student loans. That's a big one because even if you go through a public bankruptcy, that doesn't work for a student loan. So those are you typically very burdensome. And you know, equity is a private discharge, so you don't need to sign a contract with the court. They have a judge oversee the discharge. You get to do it yourself. Not only that, you know, let's just talk about a military draft for a second. The word draft is a banking term. It's a negotiable instrument. So if they're trying to draft you into military service, it's a bill, okay? And equity provides the remedy for that. They just want that bill settled, and what you either have to go work it off in the military, or you have to go sit in jail, or one of the two, okay? But there's a third option if you want to take advantage of that, and that's applying your substance to discharge that charge. So practical application wise, you know, I liken it to, you know, you go to the mailbox and you open it up and there's something in there from an agency or some kind of creditor, and you know, the normal reactions have a little bit of a heart palpitation and you know, be a little nervous. You know, you can go to the mailbox when you know this. You can go to the mailbox and you know exactly what to do with those offers that are in the mailbox. And you know, it doesn't mean you complying, and it doesn't mean you paying out of your sweat equity. So you can settle those out with your substance in the system because everything's based on you anyways. Um, and you can go about your life in peace and not have to worry about that kind of stuff. Also, let's talk about the taxing agencies for a second. Um, you know, those are offers. We're in a voluntary tax system. You know, there's some debate about this. However, it comes down to contract, and it's only mandatory if you're contracted up. If you're not contracted up and you know how the contract game works, then it's voluntary and you don't, and you know, people go, oh, well, people go to jail for tax evasion or willful failure to file, you know, because they don't know how to reply to those letters in the mailbox. Those are offers, and if you go into dishonor over that, they're going to prosecute that dishonor on you. And when you know how to stay in honor with them, they know this very well, and you know, now they're sending letters recently that say, oh, if somebody's helping you with this or suggesting you do this, you know, you got to reconsider. You know, now because you know they're changing their tactics because more and more people are starting to do this, and they're trying to stem the tide, and so they're trying to plausible deniability and make people question what they're doing because that's the only tool they have. They only have plausible deniability or to turn up the heat on an existing contract obligation. But however, you have to have a contract for them to do that. So those are the tools they have, and we're aware of those. But practical application wise, it's the peace of mind to walk to that mailbox and know whatever's in there is not something that's going to bind you. Okay, you know how it works, and you can settle those matters and be free of that. And that goes for you know any public reference.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's it's such a relief to have that extreme well that just deep knowledge, right? And that assurity that hey, it's like you can't come at me with your little debt claims because and this is a really important I think idea we could you know sort of end on a bit here. We're coming up on over an hour and a half and I know um we want to get going here, but this idea of the creditor that we are the creditor, right? And so we are the ones with the power. And so we've been tricked into thinking that we're the debtor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and one other thing about the credit card issue, because, and this is where I think equity can come into play because and this is something my wife asked because she's still trying to wrap her head around this as I'm, taking care of some of the stuff. And she's like, so what? Like, you can just free money now? Like, you can just discharge everything. You can just go get a Lamborghini. And like, what about all the people working in the Lamborghini warehouse in the factory? And like, how are you not screwing them over? And like, where are the repercussions there? Like, how does that even make sense? Like, you can just, live like a king now. And I'm like, so how do we answer that question?
Well, it's not about getting away with something. It's not about using the system. It's about equality, like we talked about earlier. It's about being made whole. It's about the scales being balanced. Now, they don't tell you that your signature on that application creates creates the commercial energy no one's loaning you anything. It's your commercial energy, your substance that creates the funds for all of those people to pirate. So when you sign the application, that creates the funds. They take that to the Fed window. They swap that in for the digits. They pay for whatever right then and there. But then they get you to sign a promissory note, or you as the debtor on the contract are double dipping. Okay, you're paying them back with your sweat equity. They already got the credit, and they're charging you interest. It's usury. Okay, so you got to know how the system works. And our signature creates the funds. It also can extinguish the funds. The power of the pen. They're being made whole. They're actually a discharge is actually deflationary instead of inflationary because they don't have to print more notes. Okay. Yeah. When a bill is discharged, it actually takes you're not creating more notes that go in the circulation. It actually extinguishes that account. And everyone's made whole in the process. That's why this is lawful and it works. And they built this into the system. This is built into the system. Okay. They had to do it because of the inequity for making us the substance and for the whole credit system that we're living in. So it's not about usury because those maxims I talked about earlier, in order to receive equity, you must do equity. In order to receive equity, you must come with clean hands. It's not about using the system and going out and intentionally getting credit and discharging it and acting like you're using it. When you build a record of like that, you may be construed as not doing equity and you may not receive equity for those things. So it's not about usury. It's about not being encumbered by this system that you're waking up to. And it's a way to redeem yourself and to clear your affairs and to live in the private. In fact, the ones that really embody equity don't really participate, they choose where they participate in the system because those contracts, when you understand the contracts you're entering, do you really want to enter a contract with the public where you're the debtor inherently anyways? So you got to think about those dynamics. And as we wake up to all these things, you get more of a sense of what you should be involved in and what you shouldn't. But just to let you know, everybody's made whole and it's built into the system and they know this. And those accounts are zeroed out. So no one's losing. However, it's not also designed for us to use the system and to our advantage. And that's not equitable in ways either if you look at the principles.
And whoever creates an offer or a debt owns it unless they can get somebody else to accept it. So it's really that simple.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that way because I get that a lot where people are like, well, why are they even requiring me to pay when they have the power of the signature? Can't they just go off and make their own money? And so it's an exchange of energy first and foremost. And the point is to where we can get there to where you're not having to pay with these fiat debt notes, right? With these Federal Reserve notes, like we're all working towards that. And we're working like Michael hinted that, he and I have talked in the background with Music and Sky and like working towards private land. And of course, Bear has worked with Marcia Ann and with Alfa Vedic on our private trusts and that stuff. We're all moving towards that way because you can't just go use this system that is rotten to the core to perpetuate it. That's not what we're here to do. If you're doing that, you're perpetuating the very thing that we're trying to basically move away from, correct?
Yeah, and I want to bring up also that we're talking about public debts, okay? Because this system is administered by the Federal Reserve. They're the ones that that it's through their system that these public debts are these issuances and these the charges and the discharges are all through that system. When you're dealing with private people don't have access to that system. And so it's not about Like for instance, we don't in equity, we're not going out there and creating money in the system per se. We're just function, when we're in the public arena, that's just how it works. But when you're dealing with another human being like me and you, like we need to be compensated for our labor for what we're giving, and that's natural law right there, and so we don't have the access to the system to go and do this and change out stuff. Now that's why we have to be presented with the bills from their system in order to authorize the digits so they can go and exchange that in. It's a bill of exchange, but we're not creating those. We're just presented with them. So that's a big distinction because I know people that do create their bills of exchange, but they don't have anyone to exchange them with. So it's only worth what you can exchange it for. Like an artist who paints a painting, yeah, they may value it at $1 million, but they have to find someone to exchange it with them for $1 million. It may be worth that, it may be worth something, but how do you exchange it? And so, we're just that's why it's a defense as well. And this isn't an offense. We have no ability to create funds, out of thin air. Now they, on the other hand, when I say they, I mean the financial system that's administering this, that's their game, and that's something they do, and that's how we learn to function and maintain our honor in the process. Because this is not about going down and getting a Lamborghini and discharging it. That's not necessarily honorable. So I'm not here to tell you what's morally correct in your life or what you need to be doing, but I'm here to share with you and instruct you on the principles of natural law and have that sink in so that our whole society starts to reflect those principles and we start to live in honor inherently, and we're not even thinking with a dishonorable mind of how I could get away from things and how I can pull one over on somebody. That's old paradigm thinking there, and that's bred from the fictional predatory commercial system, and that's not what we're here to do.
Yeah, well stated. Well stated.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, so you guys are going to be opening up a Q&A. Michael, do you want to briefly explain that for
Sure.
those? So this wave 2 is launching next week. It's a very detailed pathway, guys. It's about 6 months long. So and there's a reason for that, because you want to take your time in not only going through the videos as they release and multiple times, but cognizing these concepts deep into your soul so that you can live and embody them. Right. So you have a Q&A coming up, Michael, for our community for that want to know more.
Yep. So the highest encouragement is the link that's down below, to go through that link and get the complimentary ebook. That's like step number 1, and go through that book. And as Phil was stating earlier, once you put in your information and then you get the ebook, it'll be emailed to you, and then there's going to be another video that pops up. Watch it. It's so imperative. Then you can enroll into the course if you want to at that point. And if you have some deeper questions, you can come into an open call that we have this Sunday. It starts at 6:15 Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Pacific. And Mike, you've got the link for that as well. I guess you could put it in there, but that, once that Q&A call is done, it's done. So that link won't be activated after that point. But I just encourage you to go through that information first, and then it'll birth some more curious questions or more intelligent questions to bring to a live Q&A if you still have questions at that point. You may not. You might be ready to enroll, or you're certain of where you are in your path. But if you've got more curiosities, join us on that call this Sunday at 6:15 p.m. and it'll go on, reasonably as long as we need to answer people's questions. It's really just all about Q&A.
I'm putting that in the chat right now, and then I will put that on our Telegram, and I guess we could email that out to everybody as well.
Yeah.
So
sure.
yeah. So yeah, we definitely really appreciate your doing that, because one thing I really see about this, and it's really in line with the non-aggression principle, one of the best pathways for changing the world. Right? It's not taking out weapons and revolting that way. Yeah. It's just in honor, discharge, using our own innate energy to stay in peace, to deflect any of their predatorial actions, and so that we can not be indebted, and so that we can then create the new beautiful world we all know in our hearts is possible.
And gentlemen, we really appreciate you making this, your great work available to our community. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for being open to it and seeing it for what it is and bringing it forward. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah.
And one more time, Phil, what was the discount code?
Discount code is Alpha 500.
Okay.
Alpha all caps 500.
Yeah, ALFA 500.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll send out an email tomorrow morning. We have to send out one. So maybe Bear, we can attach that in the email, just some information here so everyone can see it. Really appreciate you guys going out of your way to do that Q&A and offer the discount. Because yeah, the more of us that can get involved with this and just start living in this way, the more peace on earth, right? So
Indeed.
that's simple.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it inherently, it's like one of those movies where the monster or the evil entity grows off of fear and anger, and when we start to have peace and love in our energy field, it loses all of its power immediately because it's all perception anyways. So us going to that place of peace is a thing that the system fears most for its control mechanisms, because us being resistant, arguing, and putting our energy towards fighting the system. And Michael says this a lot too. This corporate system is not ours to change anyways. Our right as sentient moral beings is to create our own self-governance and not be beholden to some corporate system that's not ours anyway. So if we try to change things in someone else's house, they can tell us to get out of the house, or throw us out on our ear, So it's not about changing a broken down system that is dying anyways. It's about creating what's next. And that's what we're here to do. And natural law is going to be the foundation of this new society, just like the natural foods and natural medicine and everything else natural that this community stands for. And so that's what it's really about.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
And
It's not
that's-
about reformation. It's about love, love, love.
Yeah. Bear says that all the time about like the presidential election. It's really none of our business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that sense of
Yep.
peace is what's going to bring you health in your physical body more
much.
than anything you could eat or take.
Oh,
Yeah.
true medicine through and through.
Mm.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you,
bless.
brothers, so much. And yeah, we got to get together in person again. It was
Yep.
fantastic having Phil at Music and Sky on Sunday. It was
Yeah.
great. You didn't have you had your shoes off, so you were barefoot. You were really just like right in there. Michael couldn't make it, but next time, it's right up your alley. It's music and
Totally.
truth and sovereignty.
We've
And of course, yeah.
we got Marcia out here, so I'd love to see you guys if you ever feel like an adventure west,
Yeah.
northwest, I guess, from you
Yeah.
guys.
A little bit further
Yeah,
north.
Yeah.
always a place for you here. I'd love to see you.
Maybe
absolutely. Thank you.
maybe down the line after this passage is done, we work together and continuing to build ideas. Maybe there is a workshop we can do at Alfa Vedic down the line. We're kind of in the midst of building stuff right now on the land, but Bear, once we get sort of that community centered
Absolutely.
stuff,
Yeah.
with our private co-op, and I think coming together to start to mastermind what is the new. And Marcia Ann, we brought her up. She's been working on ideas around new currency and like new
Yep.
ways. And that's what I talk about. Like, okay, we're moving beyond all that. We're crossing the bridge in the private. So what's that going to look like? And how can we come together to mastermind how that's going to work? And of course, Music and Sky with Alfa Vedic, we're working on actual sovereign communities and buying land and then transferring that into the private, as I know with Sovereign Town and things you're working on, Michael. So that's what's really exciting. It's like really, really fantastic times to come. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for all those open possibilities. I'm a yes on all of them. And I extend the welcome to you guys as well. I know you had some of your good homies just visit through in the fellowship house here last weekend. You guys are always welcome. We got plenty of room for you guys if you ever want to dip in. So I'd love to have
Awesome.
your presence.
Amazing.
Thank you very much
guys
for
are
having us in your community. It's always great talking with all of you.
Yep.
Such a pleasure, guys. And thanks for the presentation, putting that work in, Phil. And you guys can I recommend watching that again. This will actually drop on LooshTube tomorrow as our strike gets released. So we're always
That's
on
safe. Unless they dig up another one like they did last time.
We've got 6 days to that first strike is released, so maybe I shouldn't jinx ourselves.
Right, right.
But it's okay because
Round.
that's the custom, right? That's like the public where people are used to
Yeah.
going, but we're like
Yeah.
moving beyond that. And eventually we won't need that. We only are on that platform to bring people over to stuff like our private platform at alfavedic.com. So please go join us there. And we love you guys. Remember to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go show Mother Nature some love. She'll show it right back to you. You sentient moral beings, you. Yeah, baby, love. Love is the new normal, my new normal. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. Peace out.
Blessings, everyone.
Thanks, guys.